Yesterday, or today, depending on where you are, in 1933, Christopher Lee came into this world. The day before that, two things happened, just in different time frames. One saw the birth of Peter Cushing in 1913, and secondly, in 1897, Bram Stoker's bestseller, Dracula, was published. Does anybody else think that that is the most strangest and most wonderful coincidence ever? Hello everyone, this is B. Harper from supermarcy.com, and as you can probably guess, I'm going to take the plunge and review Bram Stoker's Dracula. Now the edition I have here is the new annotated Dracula with the editorials and the notes by Leslie S. Klinger, with an introduction by Neil Gaiman, no less. This is my Bible. It is one of my most valued literary possessions, and I'm so glad that I took the opportunity to blow about, I say $35 on this baby, and you know what, it's worth every penny. Okay, so this is how this video is going to go. For the most part, I am going to talk about the book itself, and the way I figure it, I'm going to make two videos. The first one is going to be about the book. The second one is more or less going to be about the themes in the book, either the themes that have been confirmed, as well as the things that I've noticed, you know, on every sort of reread I've had of this book. So without further ado, Bram Stoker's Dracula. A little bit of background first. So as you know, Bram Stoker wrote this book. Now, while he was preparing for it, while he was doing the research, he was researching vampires and, you know, sort of supernatural lore in like, you know, Europe, like Eastern Europe, around that sort of region, as well as the fact that around that time he was also the theatre manager for the Lyceum Theatre. In particular, he was working for the actor Henry Irving. Henry Irving was pretty much the toast of the town back in the day. He was the actor that everyone came to the stage to see. And he and Stoker had a very interesting relationship. Irving was very domineering and Stoker himself was very sort of submissive, which is strange because Stoker was a very big man. He was like, say, 6'3", very, very Irish, and incredibly tall and broad. But Henry Irving was very tall and very slim and very dynamic in his movements. And later on, Stoker would come to appropriate Irving's movements and his mannerisms with the character of Dracula. In addition to that, there are two sort of conflicting reports here. One of them was that he had a nightmare about the three witches from Macbeth, and that would come to shape later on the vampire brides of Dracula who come to assault Jonathan Harker. There was also reports of Stoker complaining that he once had too much crab meat at a cafe, and he had a nightmare, and this nightmare involved a vampire king rising from the grave. There's been no sort of confirmation or denial about the reports, but it's very sort of fascinating when you hear and read, you know, how Stoker came to create this thing that would become an enormous phenomenon that lives on even today. So as you can guess, when it was released, Dracula caused quite a stir, and the reason why that was so was that it was more or less a reflection of the society and the people at the time. Now, although we come to associate Victorian England with you know, sexual repression, nothing could be further from the truth, because while people tended to, you know, keep up the mask of, you know, propriety and primness and, you know, being very God-fearing, in reality, everybody was randy back in the day. Because there was, in fact, there were literature, you know, pornography being openly sold at the time, and this stuff had it all, I'm telling you. It had bestiality, incest, lesbianism, bisexuality, gayness, you know, and that was like considered the normal sort of stuff in the literature. Like, I would shudder to think what else they could have had in the more sort of, you know, hardcore diabolical stuff, but I digress. Yeah, although Dracula certainly was not the first vampire novel back in the day, it was definitely one of the most influential. Now, the whole vampire and sexual sort of undertones came from Sheridan Le Fanu's Carmilla, which involves a lesbian vampire enslaving a young woman. So with Dracula, also around this time, there was a huge amount of xenophobia. That being, there was consistent fear of a European invasion on Britain. And quite a lot of the fantasy literature kind of reflected that. You had stuff by H. Rider Haggard, Rudyard Kipling, Robert Louis Stevenson, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, and H.M. Wells. Oh, rather, H.G. Wells, I should say. Slap. And all of them involved some sort of foreign potent power coming to England and taking it all over. Taking over the finances, taking over the people, the land, and of course, the women's! What are we going to do about the women's? And Dracula, more or less, was a further echo of that. Dracula comes to England to expand his capital and comes to infect, or rather enslave, humanity. That particularly being the women. You have Mina Harker / Mina Murray, as well as Lucy Westenra. Now that's another interesting thing. Although Bram Stoker was not a feminist, he makes a point at emphasizing the difference between Mina and Lucy. Mina is very sort of put together. She's very composed, very intellectual, and very, she's very contained. Even when she's bitten by Dracula, she has a moment of panic, of uncertainty, but she remains loyal to the cause. Like she tries to retain her humanity and her dignity as much as she possibly can. With the character of Lucy, when she is bitten by Dracula, and as she is steadily turning, she starts to become wanton, she starts to become out of control and lusty and just, and alarms the men. That is what makes the men, most scared. It's not necessarily the fact that she's becoming an unholy blood-sucking ghoul, even though, that's pretty much a given. But it's the fact that she's coming into very close and intimate contact with the unbridled element of her sexuality. And when they come across Lucy in her tomb, she's very sort of seductive and, come to me, that sort of thing. And, the guys are having a very difficult time trying to resist her. And it's only Van Helsing who is able to do that. He's able to, fend her off and, put her back to bed, so to speak. So, when she's prone, during the day, when she isn't aware of what's going on, that is when she is staked through the heart. And as you can probably guess, the stake is somewhat of a phallic symbol. But going back to the whole sort of female angle of all this, there was such a thing called the modern woman back in the day, and the modern woman was somebody who didn't rely on the traditional social feminine graces. She was the one who went out there and started to think freely. And while that was obviously a huge benefit for what was to come with suffrage and feminism and all that, it was also met with a lot of trepidation, specifically from the men. And, who would have thought a woman who was thinking freely and, reading her books and becoming educated and going out there and working, that kind of disrupted the status quo at the time. And it was very, very frightening. I've also maintained that Dracula is somewhat of a commentary on capitalism. You see, rather than paper money or coins or that sort of thing being a factor, Dracula's means of currency is propagation through blood. It is when he infects the people. It is when he, makes them his thralls. So when he comes to England in order to, expand his hold on the world. But he does so in a very subtle manner. And, when he's able to simultaneously control Lucy and Renfield, you have two very different personalities, but they both end up being loyal to him. And they both have a sense of, that they don't want to do it, but they feel compelled to do it, Without Dracula, in their thrall state, they are nothing. So, Dracula's currency, his finances, his life force, it is in the blood. Blood is the life. And without it, he is nothing. But he doesn't respect humanity for this. He does not give, tit for tat for humanity. What he does is that he takes it away from you. And the only thing he gives you back is the pretense of eternal life, but in reality, you are still loyal to him. All right, so he figures you will eternally owe him no matter what. And yeah, that's pretty much what capitalism does. Like, you know, it provides you with stuff that you think you want, and, you know, you become, you know, bombarded by all this stuff, when in reality, it is kind of suffocating you. That is what excess does. You don't know when to say stop, or rather, when you do, you can no longer stop. You can no longer stop yourself from going out there and, you know, sucking other people's blood and making them like you. You know, that's the nature of Dracula's infection. So yeah, there is a lot going on in this book in terms of society. And may I say, as I said, even though Dracula was not the first of its kind in terms of, you know, vampires, ghosts, ghouls, sort of stuff, I feel the reason why it has endured for so long is that it is, you know, it's very conscious of the society it was written in. And yeah, that's pretty much how I think in terms of the themes of the book. Isn't it funny how I started this video saying, oh, I'm going to review the book first and then I'm going to talk about themes. See, this is what this book does to me. It pretty much, you know, once I go on a tangent, I just keep on going down all the different avenues, and it is so frustrating. But at the same time, when you look at it for yourself, and when you consider that this book was written at a time of which, you know, there was a lot going on, you know, socially, and, you know, the public consciousness was starting to shift. And, you know, the Edwardian era was just around the corner. You know, the reign of Queen Victoria was just starting to sort of die off, and, you know, this brand new century was coming into play. There was so much going on at the time, and I also feel that Dracula is a afterthought of the Jack the Ripper terror. Even though Jack the Ripper took place, you know, quite some time before Dracula was published, it was still very fresh in the consciousness of the people, like this unseen, unquantifiable menace going around and, you know, doing all this stuff to these poor prostitutes. And, you know, that maybe I'm reaching a bit here, but perhaps Dracula himself is also a commentary on Jack the Ripper, like the serial killer. He knows he can't be caught, and that's why he's doing what he does. Like, he knows that nobody can catch him because of what he is. He hasn't given any indication. Nobody knows his nature. Nobody knows what he is and what he can do. And if you don't have knowledge of something, how can you possibly stop it? How can you stop it from going out every night and doing what it does? You really got to know your enemy. And not towards the later section of this book, that the vampire hunters, you know, Van Helsing, Harker, Morris, Seward, Homewood, Murray, you know, that they are still, you know, at a loss as to knowing what Dracula is. They have no conception, because they don't know. Well, maybe, okay, Van Helsing knows what a vampire is because he has expertise in the in folklore and whatnot, but everybody else is so reliant on rationality in society that the existence of an unholy being does not come naturally to them. You know, the knowledge that these things exist is all but unthinkable until they find themselves directly targeted, or somebody they love has been targeted. So yeah, there is so much going on in this book, and it only gets better the more you read it. You may not necessarily pick up on these things when you first read it, because hell, I know I didn't, but as you get older and as you read more and more about the world and about the people, and the more you apply it to what's going on here, you know, that's when it becomes most clear to you. So, yeah. Mind blown, right? So, yes, second video, I promise, I will review the book itself. Thank you so much for being patient with my ranting, and I shall see you in a couple of minutes. Bye-bye now.